Welcome back to 2MoreTakes, clumsiest podcast on YouTube. My name is Jack.
My name's Joe.
And welcome. Today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, I guess, from what we've been talking about at the moment, because obviously we do a lot of culty stuff, but we talk about a few new movies, but for the most part we just sort of talk about old movies, I feel. Besides, of course, with the recent Zack Snyder Justice League upload that we did.
Yeah, we've done a mixture though, I think. We have been going back and forth a little bit recently, but I'm sure today we'll be talking about a film that everyone's heard of and seen.
Well, two of them, yeah. Well, yeah, I suppose the first one is definitely one that's more infamous and more beloved. And of course we can get into our own feelings and preferences of each one, I think, obviously, at the end, but... I guess, obviously, well, they'll have read the title, but today we're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Hooray!
The frickin' Guardians of the Galaxy, guys.
Except we didn't use frickin'.
Yeah.
This has been something that I think both of us have been... I don't think it's been, the top of our list of priorities on the list of, films that we've wanted to talk about on here. But it's been one that's on there for a long time, I think, since we first made that basic list of what we were making.
And I think you said it'd be nice to talk about a film where, we could just say positive things about it for the most part.
That was supposed to be the last episode, to be fair, though. It's just that I made the suggestion, but we both stupidly agreed to watch Blues Brothers 2000, and then obviously that 5-minute rant at the end of the last video came into fact. With this one, I do think it's a case where, luckily, both of the films in the same franchise we're looking at right now, both originator and sequel, are good. It's going to be nice to talk about something that we both enjoy, and that we enjoy both of.
Obviously we'll start with Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 1. Involves the meeting of the Guardians of the Galaxy. What do we know? What year it came out? Probably not.
It's 2014.
2014.
Yeah. So it was in the churning of the MCU, because that was really when they were starting to churn out sequels and movies in the same year. Because I think that time, after Avengers, they were putting about 2 movies out a year, because the same year as Avengers they had Thor 2. A year after that, in 2013, they had Iron Man 3. I can't remember if anything else came out in 2013, but 2014 was The Winter Soldier, Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and this film. I think both are obviously quite beloved by Marvel fans, but I think this one was the only one that really got past the MCU sort of hype.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's 2014, and then the sequel was 2017, although I believe that they're both set during the same time. They're both set in 2014. They're not... The MCU and timelines is all crazy, so you don't have to care or notice that. You can just pretend it's 2017.
Mm-hmm. Probably most well known for its soundtrack, right?
I was going to say that, I think, to be fair, I guess the elephant in the room... Besides, of course, the James Gunn situation, which we're not going to talk about here because it got resolved. But besides that, the elephant in the room for this entire conversation and the entire topic of these films is that the soundtrack, it's the immediate thing that sticks out at you. I remember, last night, you and I, and obviously a friend of ours, the same friend who said that they preferred Suicide Squad, we had a really sort of interesting talk at the end of that part, where he was suggesting some films that I'd never heard of and stuff like that. But before then, if you remember, obviously, we talked briefly about the every single episode show. Every single episode, I'm going to bring up Star Wars. I'm going to do it. I've done it. It's happened. There's no getting rid of it. I refuse to let you edit this part out. It's every episode. It's like Stan Lee. It's going to turn up in every single episode. It's like the original trilogy. It's like A New Hope, and Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, because that's the crap one. But it's not the crap one. It's just a little bit less good. But I remember I was thinking of that because obviously now we're talking about music in this film, similar space film with obviously renowned for its music as one of its big elements. But obviously differently to, say, Star Wars, this one's kind of got a bit of a different appeal in its sort of extra stuff. Because obviously you have the similarities. I mean, you can tell in the film. There's so many similarities to Star Wars. I think Guardians of the Galaxy is basically just a rip-off in some respects with how they presented a ton of the elements. Like the spaceship battles and all that with the little fighters. all doing dogfighting and that. There's obviously, it's all aesthetics rather than like anything sort of story-wise. But that's the thing is that like in this, it's really character focused. I think that's the entire. I think besides the soundtrack, I think that's the thing that's under the surface quite the the prominent element in these films.
Yeah, it's very much about, especially the first. Well, they're both very good. But the first one in particular is obviously characters meeting up for the first time, so it does focus a lot on each character and showing them off, and then basically getting to know them, and then as you said, there's a lot of. We compared it to a couple of films when we rewatched it the other day.
Yes.
But you said about Star Wars with. A lot of there were a few scenes in particular that we were joking about, but big space battle towards the end, and
I mean, I think one of the reasons why it's also not just in the sci-fi department, because there was a lot of sci-fi things we were comparing it to, because I think. Oh, what was the other thing that you noticed? 'Cause obviously, I noticed the big thing, but I'm not going to talk about that until maybe the end.
Yeah, I compared it to T2 because
that's
of
it.
Nebula,
Because of Nebula. Yeah,
and she had some scenes where she was like breaking through windscreens like Terminator and stuff. So
and she's like reforming out.
The whole where she molds back together. Yeah,
I said that she has the bone density or like the body density of like a shampoo bottle. Like she deflates and then inflates again if you like let some air in or whatever. You crack it.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think that one of the things I think about those so similar, just forgetting the sci-fi sort of elements to other films, is that I feel like Guardians 1 is the blueprint for an ensemble cast superhero film, or even just as simple as like a 5-man band sort of like adventure film where you have like not a large amount of characters, but still a fair amount of main characters for a superhero or like a adventure film, especially for the running time it has. It's not only efficient in its storytelling, it's effective because it does. Like, the way James Gunn's weaved in, both comedy and, like, sentimental moments and character building into these films, it's kind of like a perfect storm. Like, it's kind of a miracle that it's turned out the way it has, because I think there are a lot of James Gunn's work that I'm unfamiliar with, I've not seen directly, but there's, like, scenes I've seen from it where I'm like, ooh, that doesn't work, that comedy doesn't work in that scene. But I do think, to be fair, that it again, I'm not going to name names on those films because I haven't seen them all the way through. It would be unfair to judge them as a whole on that.
Yeah.
But I feel like every film is copying from this film, though. Every modern film, like Suicide Squad. You even have that scene in the bar where they're trying to recreate that bit when they're in the ship coming up with the plan for Yondu to save the planet.
Yeah.
And like Rocket's arguing with them and stuff.
No, it is very as we said when we were watching it, the plot itself is quite simple.
Yeah.
Like the main plot, you got your simple bad guy who's, very obviously just bad guy, I will kill you sort of thing. And
Mr. Evil, destroy the planet man.
Evil Blue.
I am evil man. I will kill you.
Yeah. But then the whole plot in general, it takes some turn. They've got little tangents here and there of plot, but the main plot is very simple,
boring, really.
Yeah, and it's just it's mainly the execution and delivery of the whole film as a package that, as you said, with the comedy, the sentiment, it does a very good job of putting it all together.
I do suppose that I should quantify what I meant by the story's boring, though. I don't mean that the film is boring. I just mean that, like, it's like a story we've seen a dozen times.
Yeah.
I think that it is. I think that Guardians of the Galaxy has probably been one of the most influential pieces of media for me as a storyteller and what I like about film. Not the most, but I do think that as a modern example of films, it's one of them. It's definitely not the most effective thing. It's not. Like, we as well, another thing from last night, when we were talking, we were just hanging out, as we often do, over Discord. We were just reviewing, like, my top 30 film list that I made last year. You can, obviously, you might remember the Guardians and Guardians 2 are not on that entire thing. They are still some of my favourite films ever, but I don't think they're within my top 30, at least. Or at least, when I made that list, I hadn't thought of it. Because, again, there was, like, T2 was missing and stuff like that. But I still had T1. But yeah, I think that the as you said, the simple storytelling is completely engulfed, or like I guess surpassed by the element that the characters, like it's the storytelling is more focused on the character building, which we've already said. I don't want to reiterate that too much, but that is really the main appeal of the films, is that they're not simple plots, as you said. They're kind of boring plots in other films. Like it's very, a lot of them are very villain of the week. I think the second film gets away from that a little bit because it has a bit of a better villain, but Ronan in the first film, I obviously did a joking impersonation of him there, but he is just like Mr. Evil. I'm going to kill everybody. I have the purple power stone thing. I'm Space Hitler. I'm going to kill you all. I want to have sex with your planet, or whatever he wants to do in that film, because he wants to touch the planet or something. But again, it's like that scene where he's doing that, and then Star-Lord stops him by dancing at him. It's like I think that obviously one thing that we probably haven't mentioned on the podcast, but in our time, both currently and in the past, and probably in the future, we have and will continue to play things like Dungeons and Dragons, like tabletop games, role-playing games, and I feel like a lot of them take on a lot of, like, I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy is an elaborate sort of space version of, or like I guess like it's the Lord of the Rings of like a space tabletop RPG. Well, I feel like if you're playing Age of Empire or something, those are the characters you try and recreate. You even have like a Han Solo-esque character in Star-Lord.
I was going to say that the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy, I like how basically, because this thing with me as well, superhero films, I'm not always a big fan of, just because, there's not always high stakes. There's superheroes, a lot of them are just seem immortal, and, they're sometimes, I'd say some superhero films are too serious in comparison to, like, the superheroes themselves that are,
well, a lot of them are very goofy, aren't they? Like they came from a very goofy era in comic book writing. And I mean, Captain America is a caricature that they've had to make serious through the movies now, and sort of try and modernize with themes of like terrorism and stuff like that. Like that's I guess Marvel's attempt at what Zack Snyder tries to do with all of his films, with all his DC films.
But
obviously they're all like a miserable nightmare, but obviously even in the Marvel films, as you say, like some of them are just like the difference is they're playing it entirely straight, whereas this one has a bit of humor to it, doesn't it? Not in the Marvel humor way, but it's got a bit of like color and wit to it.
Guardians of the Galaxy, you can tell that they're having, again, it's another one where they're having a lot of fun with it, and there are emotional moments, but in general, a lot of the characters, as you said, it's like a D&D where, you can just be this sort of stereotypical character, and, you've got Drax, who's takes every word literally, and, may not be the smartest character sometimes.
Yeah. Well, we said while we were rewatching it, he's just a barbarian character. Like, he laughs and, like, throws people, and because it's so ridiculous, and also using, like, wire pulls and stuff like that to throw people across the room, it's still, like, it's something that shouldn't be funny in a normal film where people are being wire pulled, because there's a sort of more serious tone. But because it's in this film, like, and the characters are they are so obvious, but also there's so much underlying stuff that, again, it's just like, it's the perfect blend of all those elements. But when the comedy does happen, there are obviously some things that have become a bit sort of like overdone, or like some jokes that fall flat now or did at the time, and that's in both films. But I mean, there are just little bits like that where it's just like Drax goes up and like punches the prison guards or whatever, or like picks them up and throws them. And he's doing the Valhalla scream and stuff like that. Like, he's like full Viking barbarian, and it's hilarious. At least it is to me. I lost my shit at that moment.
It was, for me, it was the laugh, because he laughs before he starts. Yeah.
There's a combination of it all, I feel like. It was just, it's the cartoony picking up of a man, the laughing. He's just delighted to cause pain. It's great.
But it is this thing of, like, superhero films, a lot of them do go over the top in, like, exaggerated stuff. And it's like, they've... Even, because Guardians of the Galaxy, some of them are have some sort of powers, but most of them aren't, like... I mean, Quill is meant to be human, mostly, and...
Well, instead of powers, they kind of just have, like, talents and gimmicks, rather than, like... It's rather than, like, okay, this person shoots plasma from their hands, or they have super strength. Some of them, I think most of them do have super strength, but that's more because they're aliens, and that's kind of more believable.
Yeah, but even like
Quill doesn't have that. He just has like technology and stuff.
Yeah, Quill, but especially like Quill and Rocket as well is pretty much just a raccoon with a gun who's very smart. Yeah. But even those two characters, right at the beginning of the film, we were saying how Quill should probably be dead. At this,
when Gamora punches him,
yeah, because he gets thrown about, and I'm like, his back. If he was actually. Like, as we based on the second film, he could be his god's side of him, I guess. That makes him a little bit more immortal, but...
To be fair, I think that a lot of that does come from the second film as well, because I think the reason why I thought of, like, Gamora punching him should kill him is because Gamora's strength is kind of, like, it's pushed up a bit more in that film.
Yeah.
Like, because again, she picks out the big space cannon and stuff like that, but like in the first film, she's kind of just like Black Widow tough, really.
And also, I'd say that every superhero film does the thing where characters are as strong as they need to be in the moment, because Gamora in fighting Quill is sort of just regular, fist fight, whereas in other parts or in the other film, she like punch through things and pick up a giant rocket gun. So they do play around with that. But, again, Guardians of the Galaxy, as I said, doesn't take everything seriously. It is meant to be fun sometimes,
Yeah. I mean, it's as consistent as it needs to be on the rules, though.
Yeah.
It is just, as you say, obviously, it does forego sometimes for more, like, okay, this will be more entertaining if we do this.
I mean, it does the movie thing where it's like, in real life, that character would probably be dead, but we're willing to let that go because it's a superhero film and we're just having fun. We're just, we're laughing along with the characters. We feel for this character, and they still do pull all that off while, be exaggerating certain elements. So,
yeah, I feel like it's I feel like all. Like this franchise of films and the first film, and the second film individually in their own merits, I feel like they're just fun. Like it's not this is not to devalue their intellectual sort of elements like the writing and the acting and the direction and the funny gags that you have, all that stuff. It's not to devalue that by saying it's dumb fun, but it's it's obviously it's not the smartest thing. But I think among the other Marvel films and among other films in the genre, I feel like you can't get any better than what James Gunn and the crew and cast of that film has done. And both of those films have such great emotional cores that are linked with the comedy. That's the thing, is it's the balance between those elements and the serious stakes of the story. It's near perfect in all of that, and it's just fun to watch. I think. For most people, you can show them Guardians 1, and they'll just be like, oh, yeah, this is a good movie, and enjoy it. I think Guardians 2 might be a bit more sort of controversial, because I think that one's more focused and more sort of specialized. Guardians 1 is kind of still like a generic sort of Marvel film in its plot and story, but the story of the actual characters and their relationship and the dynamic that they all form, like the mini friendships they find when they like leave the prison and stuff like that, and like the characters who previously hated each other start taking sides with each other. Like Rocket and Quill start forming a relationship, and Gamora and Drax start forming a relationship, despite the fact that both of these sets of characters used to hate each other towards the beginning of the film.
Yeah,
like there's so many nuances and middle grounds in the gray areas.
That's also a strong point. Like, it is fun, but every character's backstory is done very well. If not in the first film, in the second film, I think, because the first film does well for most of them, but I think the second film clears up a couple of things, especially like Rocket might get a bit more sort of emotion to him in the second one, and there's more fleshed out of certain relationships in the second one.
I was going to say, I feel like Drax is the way they fleshed out Drax in the second one is the perfect bit of subtle storytelling they did through any of the films. Just that Mantis, holds his arm, and then he's not like, she just bursts into tears, and he's just like, he's looking so peacefully but so somber and sad. He holds all that inside of him, and yet he's just had to live with it.
Yeah, but the backstories of the characters is a very big focus of both the films, really. And
which is strange that that's such an appeal, because obviously they're quite generic backstories, really, aren't they?
I mean, some of them, but they are...
Most of them are just like dead family.
It's the execution of them that is done well.
Yeah.
And the characters themselves. That, like, everyone loves most of the characters in the Guardians of the Galaxy, really, don't they? Like, they're just some... You want to like all of them, really.
Yeah. Even the people who say Gamora's like boring, I think that's I don't agree with that. I think she's a really interesting character, and she's fleshed out really well. I think she's one of the strongest characters in the MCU, really.
I think the only problem with Gamora is she's probably the least amusing one to watch.
She's the straight man, yeah. She's the one who's playing, she's the one that everyone else is playing off of for the jokes, because everyone else is the kooky weird stuff. She is the uber serious sort of character. But even then, there are, like, I was watching, to prepare for this, obviously, I rewatched Volume 2, like, very, very, like, a few hours ago, like, to get it really refreshed in my mind. And there are jokes in that where Gamora is, obviously, she's, as a character being serious, but there are jokes where she contributes, and it's still funny. It's just that she's not being overly kooky. It's just like, okay, it's like a fish out of water, sort of thing, where it's not intentional humor. It's just it's from a different sort of cultural understanding. It's like she misremembers the name of David Hasselhoff or something, and says like, didn't he have a magical boat or something? And then Peter Quill's like, he's talking car. And stuff. It's like, it won't be the funniest joke in the world, but she does have some good sort of like sort of giggle material. I feel.
Yeah. But that's also a thing I think they do well with, obviously, Gamora and her sister Nebula. They both start out very... Especially Nebula, obviously, we mentioned in the when we watched the first one.
Yeah.
She's very robotic, very straight, very, like, I will kill them, and walks off in, robotic fashion.
Yeah, she's so much. She's, like, the most, like,
and that's why, again, I compared her to Terminator 2, with a liquid Terminator. But as you go through the films, both of them also learn from other characters, like obviously Nebula more in the rest of the Marvel films, but as they go through the films they get more character, more emotion. Gamora starts obviously joking with the other characters as she gets to know them, and Nebula also starts.
Yeah, in the first film she isn't. Yeah, both of them are very sort of serious, but in the second film, both of them sort of increase in the humor.
Yeah, and Nebula also starts to make relationships with characters as probably towards the end of the second Guardians of the Galaxy, and then in future Marvel films. So,
but she's another character that's really underrated, I feel. She's such a boring villain in the first one. But she became such an interesting and likable character. She basically became like a redemption character. She started off as a villain and then became one of the heroes. And it was because of the journey that they did with it. There wasn't as much with her, but it's still very believable. And there is, again, in the other films, like in Endgame or something, they play up to how she is as well. So she's so antisocial and sort of like depressing, and sort of she's uber serious, just like Gamora used to be. And they play for that both for drama and comedy in that film. But yeah, I mean, I guess since we're starting to go into Volume 2, I guess wrapping up this. I mean, is there anything else to really talk about Guardians 1 besides? Because again, as we said, the story really isn't that important.
Guardians 1 is very simple. But yeah, as we said, the soundtrack's great. The execution of the plot is good, and the characters, the backstory. It just introduces us to the characters. They have their, big climactic, let's save the galaxy together, we're the Guardians of the Galaxy, bitch. He does... I love it because they do restrict the swearing in these films sometimes, don't they? They're limited.
We were watching the first one, and they censored Quill going, "What the fuck?" And then like a light bulb pops behind him or something.
Yeah, but then
I
later
think the tone still. I mean, even though the swearing is sort of like, quite basic, the tone of it and how they use the sort of the interruptions of certain words and that, it still carries it as a tone of like, this is like the in your face sort of like I guess charisma based film.
Yeah. And I think also, obviously, Chris Pratt is probably one of the perfect characters to play Quill, and most of the actors in Guardians 1 they work very well for playing the jokes and the comedy as well as the emotion of these films.
Except for Vin Diesel, of course, because, I mean, literally all he says is "I am Groot," and he's in a sound booth somewhere. Whereas I think Bradley Cooper is at least on stage doing like some performance.
Yeah.
So I think he's on sound stage with people.
Yeah.
Which has got to be weird. Like you're like standing on set with Bradley Cooper, and you've got to look at his knees for reference point.
Well, I think a lot of it. I have seen some where I assume a lot of it. Bradley Cooper would probably be off stage, or like, because a lot of it they're trying to get the actual like raccoon model on the screen because that's easier to work with, and then the actors can look at that. But then they probably do have Bradley Cooper in the background for those bits where he's still doing the voice of it. But
well, no doubt they've probably got like a mannequin of Groot in the first film somewhere.
Yeah.
Obviously, Groot is an entirely CG character. I mean, he is in both films, but I think that they probably had as a placeholder like a giant mannequin, like plastic Groot or something, and then maybe they had a similar reference for Rocket. But I'm pretty sure that I've seen somewhere that Bradley Cooper is usually on stage, like just in the place of Rocket, and then they mat him out of the scene or something.
In some of it, yes, but again, I remember seeing a lot of stuff where Bradley Cooper is he's never on the stage for some of it.
Was that for one of the specific ones? Was that Guardians 1 or 2? Because it might be that I've seen one.
Probably
of them
the later stuff.
Okay.
But
yeah, it might be a case of where, like how in the later Iron Man films they just switched up like CGI suits, and then they just had Robert Downey Jr. in like a sound booth with like a visor light across his eyes. And he's just in there the entire time, and yet he earns like the most money in all those films.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Guardians 1, Volume 1.
It's a good movie.
It's a load of fun, and it introduces us to because there's a load of Marvel characters. It's introducing us to some more characters. But it does it very well.
The film that introduces the most characters in Marvel. I think it's the most. The film introduces the most characters and gets away with it because Infinity War carries having that large cast, but those are all established characters, so it doesn't really have as much of an impact.
It's also one of the first ones that really explores the space aspect as well.
Introduction of an Infinity Stone, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
The term. I think the first Infinity Stone is obviously the Tesseract, and then I think maybe there's an allusion to the thing, the ether being another Infinity Stone in Thor 2.
But it's just the fact that it's the first time we've gone to, apart from 4?
Space!
It's the first one that goes to a bunch of alien planets, really, isn't it?
The one place still uncorrupted by capitalism. Spies! So Guardians Volume 2 is... it's basically it's more of the same in some respects, but it's also completely different in others, because again, it's like, so the first one has this, I think the first one had like a slightly longer running time. One of them has a slightly longer running time, yet less happens in Volume 2. I think that one might actually be the one with the, so I think Volume 2 is a shorter film, which is it's not something you'd expect, but it's got a bit more of a focused story. Really, nothing much happens in the film, action-wise, until the end. The beginning and the end, there's quite a clear sort of, But I feel like, despite that, because there's a lot of different action bits in the first film, it's quite well-balanced, really. A lot more sort of events happen in the first film. But in the second film, it's more of a personal story about the characters.
Yeah, as I said,
and it is just it's character development in the movie. Is what it is.
Yeah, it fleshes out a lot of the characters. Some characters that didn't get enough backstory get some more. Characters that did get backstory get even more. Obviously, it focuses a lot on Quill and his.
Well, I think that's obviously the A plot, but there is also just as big a plot focus on Gamora and Nebula and Yondu and Rocket. I think, and then there is the very sort of minor bit of Drax and Mantis, and Baby Groot is just the dibby. He's there just to look cute. He obviously doesn't have anything. I suppose in a way he does kind of have an arc that he manages to finally listen and do something because he finally presses the right button.
To be fair, that's one thing that is on rewatching the first one as well. Groot gets a lot of sentimental scenes in the first film, so obviously he gets less in the second, really, because he's already had his he saves them in the first film. He gives his life for them, basically. Whereas
essentially, it's a new character now, really. And he's he's a baby, so it's only really later on that he starts to get a bit more personality again when he turns into teenage Groot.
But yes, they focus. They do focus on a lot of character relationships. But yeah, I was just saying, the main plot is about Quill and his father, really.
Yeah.
And then that results in a lot of characters meeting up. You get Mantis turns up, and Drax and Mantis have their bit. And Yondu comes in again, and Rocket and him have their bit. And Yondu has his moment with Quill as well.
Yeah. Yondu and Nebula both have they've been completely 180'd, and they're now a part of the Guardians in this film. It's it's something you didn't really have in the other films, where it's we'll take a villain and a sort of adversarial mentor character that we had in other films. We'll bring them back, and now they're just a part of the crew. And again, it works because even those characters, they have such. Besides Mantis, I think Mantis is the one who's the least developed, besides obviously Baby Groot in the film. But that's mostly because she exists as an exposition, not expedition, as an exposition dump, and also as sort of a lot of the comedy comes from her being sort of ignorant about things,
and also just in terms of she doesn't really have a backstory because she just was created basically. Right, or she was stolen.
No, she was she's rescued by him, so she's an orphan from her people, and then he found her and then made her his pet.
Yeah, but all she knows is existing on that planet, so she doesn't have much to go off of, really.
Yeah, and in a normal film, you'd expect her to be the heavy, or the side character, the side villain, the henchman. But she's just a nice person. She's just a bit sort of weird is all. But she doesn't particularly. She just fears ego is all. And then it's almost like a. And I mean this in the lightest way, not a serious representation, but it's almost like a sort of captor/abuser/victim relationship. Where he has that dominant sort of role over her, and she's fearful of him. And then when Drax sort of even though it's played for a joke right after, he says he believes in her. It's it's her overcoming that sort of that trauma.
Yeah,
and sort of taking back a bit. Yeah, taking back a bit of power. And then she gets hit by a piece of debris.
Mantis, look out!
Mantis, look out! Yeah, it's
a bit late on that one.
I think Drax is, he's just, in all of these films, I think, especially in the second one, the first, I think it's been a slow build-up, really. He's been fantastic. In the second one, there are just tons of him just being very... I think he's the best he's been in the second film, because in the first one, he's almost like the adjoining character, because you get that scene at the beginning where you get, after you've been introduced to Quill and Gamora slightly. Gamora's been in one scene before then. You get introduced to the four main characters of the film, and then after that's when you meet Drax.
Yeah.
Which he's still one of the main characters, but as well, the way that they sort of characterize him in that, he's very... I mean, that is before he's gotten to know them. So once Volume 2 comes around, he's using I guess synth. He's speaking like Quill does. He's using references to pop culture that Quill has been referencing.
Again, it's that thing of as the characters get to know each other, and they spend more time with each other. Even Gamora, Drax, all of them start to, become more comedy oriented in the same way that Quill is. They'll joke with each other rather than Drax starts off as wanting to murder Gamora, and he's quite aggressive at the beginning, and he doesn't really cool down until the end of the first film. So,
well, in the first film as well, I think one thing that this film does superior in a way is that in the first film, these characters seem like they're only friends or allies because they have a common goal. In this film, they're just they have bumps in the road of their friendship. So they do have fights, but it's Drax says it best. It's no, we're not friends, we're family. It's you do get that feeling because you get a sense of why each of them care for each other in this film.
Yeah,
like Drax and Quill kind of have that bro dynamic. It's very minor, but it's you kind of just get that these two are friends, even though Drax is very sort of mocking although in his eyes because he's being so literal, he's probably trying to be helpful. But then you have Rocket, who's sort of Rocket and Quill have that shared interest and shared talents, but they're kind of competitive.
Yeah.
Gamora's kind of just the sort of mature mother of the group for a lot of it. She has to be the moral center and the smart one in a moral and ethical way, rather than being the technically smart one. Yeah. You have that obviously the brilliantly built up to romance between Star-Lord and Gamora. I mean, this film is obviously where it started to really hit, but even it's just in both of these films, you get a feeling that these characters are in love with each other, and not once do they kiss. And I think that obviously it's not it's not having that in your film. It's oh, they kiss in your film. It's so obvious for the love. And it's but it's I mean by that is it's not being reductive of okay, you can show characters kissing in that, but by being able to show your characters falling in love without having any physical, traditionally cartoony physical intimacy, like the 40s couple that sort of the music swells and they turn and they smooch and it's oh, we're going to get married on Thursday, we met on Monday, it's say I guess I love you. In this film it takes 3 films for them to admit they're in a relationship together and to have a conventional thing, and it's so well built up towards, and you just get the feeling that it's just one of those situations where the two of them, it's they both want it to work, but Quill is too childish, and Gamora is too sort of she's too sort of closed off.
Yeah.
Then in Guardians 1 and 2, you get the feeling that they're not ready for each other yet. They need to grow as people a little bit, have some time. And that's why the ending of Guardians Volume 2 is so effective. Not just because of that, obviously. There's so many... I mean, rewatching it today, it was I didn't tear up, but I was on the border of it. That scene with... The end scene with Yondu, it really is it's one of those that hits you in the feels.
Yeah, I love that.
And the entire ending, despite the fact it's kind of sad because, Yondu's dead and Nebula's going off for revenge, and she's not staying with the crew. They're still, they're all together, and they're sort of. It is kind of a happy ending, but in a sort of somber way, and each of them, here's the thing: in this film especially, everyone has an arc. Besides, I guess Mantis, literally everyone has a character arc in this film. As I said, even Baby Groot. You have Gamora has to sort of, learn to, be accountable for things she feels and stuff like that. She's got to learn she's okay, you've got to learn to accept that she, in a way, contributed to Nebula's abuse. Even just, by trying to help herself. And she has to sort of accept Nebula as a sister. Nebula also has to sort of grow in that respect and learn to open up her heart to people. But she doesn't quite get there yet. This is the sort of beginning of her arc. Quill has to learn that, he has to sort of forge his own path, and he can't focus. He can't dwell in the past. As well, like he, again, for him and the entire film, it's very much the family you find versus the family you choose, or the family you have, or something. It's that opposing sort of, I guess, nature versus nurture type thing. Yondu has a fantastic arc in the film that isn't just related to being sort of, like the patriarchal father figure for Quill. He's just like, him and Rocket have that sort of, that really bizarrely accurate and resonant thing that you would never have thought of in the first film, that those two characters are so similar. But because of the way that they construct it in the second film, you kind of just, again, it's all just, it unlike what Todd Howard actually says about his games, it just works. It just works.
Yeah. And
I would also argue that the soundtrack, so I guess, I'm going to start into the arguing of, like, I think that Volume 2 is better than the first one.
I think I would agree, to be honest. Like, I really enjoy the second one. I've rewatched the second one a lot more as well.
I like them both, but I think that the second one has the best elements out of all of them. Out of the current two films. Because the soundtrack in both of them is very good, but I do think that the soundtrack in the second one is my favourite.
Yeah.
It has the catchiest songs, the best ones, the best variation, most fitting ones. Like, you have, Brandy, which they work into the, like the villain's argument for, you should join me, come to my side. And because of the charisma of Kurt Russell, it completely works.
Are they ripping off Star Wars again with the I Am Your Father?
Well, yeah, I suppose. They did it at the beginning of the film instead of the end, though, yeah. And then you have Father and Son song at the end as well, which is so fitting, and that's such a great song to end the film on. Yeah,
because there's some beautiful songs as well when they arrive on the planet as well, and there's a lot more emotion connected to the songs in the second one, I think. Whereas in the first one is more, again, I think it's more of that fun sort of, this is the music that Quill likes, and it's fun, and it fits with the, entertainment value of, like, the film.
Well, as well, that film had to establish the franchise, and had to establish the tone, where, it couldn't have been as weird as Volume 2. Volume 2 is very much a building on that. And that even comes in the art direction. If you remember when we were watching Guardians 1, if you compare it to the art direction and the colour in Guardians 2, Guardians 2 is a beautiful film with just fantastic art direction, fantastic colours, so vibrant, and that reflects the characters and the setting perfectly. It's this very bizarre alien landscape on Ego's planet and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Guardians 1, however, is a bit more... It's got that Marvel sort of... The early Marvel muted colour, where it's kind of like a bit drabber on the colours, whereas you get to Volume 2 and it's just like, we're going to have some bright colours, bitch. We're going to have some weird shots. It's fantastic. Yeah, and then just the character stuff, the acting, the story itself, the plot of, Quill having to fight his dad, who is a god and a planet. It's so bizarre, but so, like, emotionally resonant with the characters and their character arcs that I can't help but like it more. I think that was a controversial move when it came out initially, but I feel like as time has gone on, I think more people tend to talk about the best moments of Guardians of the Galaxy, of the moments in Guardians 2. I feel like that is the film with the most moments people remember and talk about.
And there's just more, and again, it's more in the second one. As we said, the first one's simpler. Second one expands on everything. There's more characters, more development, and it's still there's more emotion, but there's also more comedy as well. I think somehow they managed to add more of both the laughs and the emotion into the second one.
Yeah,
because I can think of a lot of bits.
I completely agree. I think that when we were watching the first one, and then obviously the many times we've watched the second one, I always feel like I laugh more during the second one. And also I feel more inside. Because the first one, I think, I think a lot of it doesn't. It's not the fault of the first film, but I feel like since, as I said, it's aged a bit, which doesn't help because obviously some of the jokes are. It's not that they're aged jokes or that they're like dated in terms of the humor. It's just like, oh, I've heard that a bunch of times. It's like 21 and 22 Jump Street. I've heard My Name Is Jeff so much I don't want to go watch that film anymore. Because I know that like the funniest joke in it is just ruined for me forever. I mean, Guardians 2, the thing is that nobody is ripping off Guardians 2 because Guardians 2 is ripping off Guardians 1 but making it better. Whereas every film is ripping off Guardians 1. And as I said earlier, with the structure sort of, it's a perfect structure, literally, almost perfect structure for how you pace and write a cast that big and a story like that. And I do think that Guardians 1 does have an advantage in the original, as something over the sequel. The sequel is more vibrant and colourful, but even like the villain it has the Ultron problem of like even he's cracking jokes, and that does work because it's Kurt Russell and he's likable and he's an interesting villain, far more interesting than Ronan. But I do think that the interesting part about not like Guardians 1 is that you do have that contrast between the quirky characters, the quirky weirdo characters, and then the serious, uber serious villains who are like it's like a normal Marvel film. It's like these characters have snuck into a Marvel film, and it's like having those two different dynamics is kind of it has that good contrast, I feel, whereas Volume 2 doesn't really have that.
Volume 2, they've obviously established it more and they know where they want to go with it. It's its own thing in comparison to the first one, as you said. It's more generic, toned, quirky characters with the Marvel structure going around it.
I feel like any criticisms, though, that could be, I guess, degrading to each of them, I feel like they're kind of made up for in each film. As I said, like, even the simple plot in the first film, or like as I said, the uber serious villains is made up for with that contrast and the utilization of that. They are two very different films in many ways, and also very similar. I think that's perfect. With a sequel, you kind of you don't want to do the same thing over again, but you do want to have the remnants of what you had in the first film. It's a very difficult thing to balance, and I think that the Volume 2 balances that perfectly. And I do think that it is the superior Guardians experience, but that's not to ever slight number one, because Guardians 1 is still fantastic. I think it's obviously way more iconic because it was the first one of that. I do think, bringing it back to Star Wars, I do think that Guardians 1 is your A New Hope, and then Volume 2 is your Empire Strikes Back. I would be very interested to see how they would cap off that trilogy, because I think they were saying it was going to be a trilogy, so I'm very much looking forward to the next film, which I expect that you are too. Yeah,
we're looking for our Return of the Jedi of the Guardians,
Yeah.
But
and hopefully, I hope it just goes in quality. It's just like I hope to get a film that's better than Volume 2, because that would be such an interesting dynamic for a trilogy. I don't think there's many out there where you just have an improvement in each iteration. But it's definitely some large shoes to fill, is all I'll say on that.
Yeah, because they've done really well with the first two. There's big expectations for the third. But also, you can compare the films, but I think the first two especially go quite well together anyway. It's like any trilogy or duo of films anyway. You put them together automatically and they are a good selection of films on their own, like when they're combined. But you can separate them out, and like the second one, I like the second one over the first one, but they're both good, and they both have their merits and their, occasional there's like little bits that you could pick on here and there, but nothing even noteworthy.
It's mostly
really.
It's just like CinemaSins nitpicking, really, is what it is. It would literally just be like, oh, there's maybe this like continuity error in a shot or something. It's like me when we were watching it the other day. It's like this guy's got a Nerf gun painted silver in the shot.
And also I pointed out, oh look, he hit that man but missed. That was one of those,
Yes,
he was nowhere near him.
Yeah, he supposedly slapped the man, and the stunt man reacted, but he didn't make contact.
Yeah, but it's still that thing of, as I said, it doesn't take itself as seriously as it could. Like a lot of superhero films, I think, are too serious, and for me personally, superhero films can't be depending on the context, can't be that serious because they're superheroes.
Imagine if we'd gotten a serious Guardians of the Galaxy film.
Yeah,
like they were already like they were the Z-list tier of like characters. These films are really the only thing that breathed new life into them and have made them. I mean, the comics sought to be, like the films, which is such an interesting development to have with Marvel, because obviously everything's coming from that source material, but being, severely sort of simplified. Because obviously you can't have in films, you can't have that length of story that you can have in an ongoing series of comic books. James Gunn basically just said, okay, I'm going to completely change this. But on that topic, Joe, I do need to briefly... So this is something I referenced earlier at the beginning of the podcast. Yeah. There's something I need to bring up, and this is the other sci-fi thing that this is incredibly like. I said this while we were watching Guardians 1. I don't know whether or not James Gunn has watched Farscape, but I would assume he has, because Guardians of the Galaxy, it's like a complete rip-off of Farscape, with the characters, not the plot, but some of the elements, some of the visuals... And that's not to say Guardians is like it's thieving and you should hate it because of this. No, it's just like it's taken heavy inspiration from Farscape, almost to the point of like direct comparison. Like it's 1-to-1 in some cases. So in Farscape, you have your main character John Crichton. He's a human astronaut. He's from the South. Peter Quill's from the South. They both like music and pop culture and often reference it. They've got guns that they're very precious about. They've got some weird technology and technological skills that are unique from everyone else. You have so that's your core character. That's your main character. They're almost identical. Then you have your second main character, female sort of soldier / assassin who's kind of a hard ass, but eventually falls in love with the main hero. Was it talking about Gamora? No, I was talking about Commander Eren Sun from Farscape. Sebastian lady who looks human and falls in love with our main character, and like she's like exactly like Gamora, apart from the green paint basically. Then you have your sort of like warrior character who's like a Klingon. He's got a sort of special sort of a special sort of relationship with like sort of sword or blade-like objects. It's like Drax and the character of Dargo. They're very sort of like, I am warrior man and I'm going to get revenge for my family. Yeah. Dargo even has like a tragic similar backstory of like, my wife was killed, his son is alive, but Drax's wife and daughter were killed and stuff like that. And then you have... Because this is another thing, is that Farscape has puppet characters, like a Jim Henson type style thing. So some of the characters are puppets. One of them is called Rigel, and he's like a tiny little dog, like sort of man. That's Rocket. Rocket's a tiny little dog man. Then you have Groot, who is a living plant. There is a character called Zan on Farscape. It's a very different character. She's a very different character, but she's a blue lady. So also you have she's a bald blue lady, so she's Nebula visually. But she's also a living plant. That's her entire deal, is that she's like, her life form, her race evolved from plants, whereas ours evolved from mammals. And yeah, they go on like space adventures in a unique kind of ship. It's so similar. Again, it's those character archetypes that he's taken out of there and put into this. But yeah, I feel like if more people watched Farscape, which they should definitely do, I'm recommend everyone should watch Farscape who likes science fiction. Well, maybe not everyone, because it's very weird. It's very, very weird. But people who like weird science fiction should definitely watch that. But yeah, I just wanted to make some people aware that, I mean, they're so similar. It's almost identical. It's not a slight against these films. It's just like, once you're a Farscape fan and a Guardians of the Galaxy fan, and you notice these things, you're just like, oh my god, that cheeky bastard. He stole it all. But anyway, I guess we're getting to recommendations. Joe, would you recommend Guardians of the Galaxy and Guardians of the Galaxy 2 individually or both?
As I said, I'd put them together. If you're going to watch one of them, may as well watch both of them, really. They're just a lot of fun. As I said, they're superhero films that don't take themselves as seriously as other superhero films, and I like that because I don't want to have to be there. It does pull off emotional moments very well, and I like that. But also, I don't need to worry about their superheroes. We know they're going to be all right for the most part. So just have some fun. Go on a space adventure. Find your space father.
Peter Quill walks up to Darth Vader. Are you my dad? I'm at the wrong building. I'm on the wrong planet.
I definitely recommend Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. No, likewise, I also recommend Guardians 1 and 2. I think again, as you said, they're kind of a complete package. You kind of have to see both of them. The first one introduces those characters. The second one elaborates on them. The second one is my favourite. I would recommend that one over it, but that's only in a sort of the capacity of, like, you have to watch Guardians 1 to get to Volume 2. That's what I feel like. It's like, you have to watch them both, but if you're going to watch one and enjoy it, I want it to be Volume 2 so that I don't have to murder you.
Yeah.
No, it's, I feel like, again, a lot of people might disagree with siding with Volume 2. I feel like we both feel that it's the superior film.
Yeah, and I think it's just more fun and more emotional. The second one,
yeah,
it does more than the first one does. So
James Gunn has set up like tons and tons of like sticks with spinning plates on him, and he's still managed to keep them spinning, even after losing his job and getting it back. So yeah, I guess that's been us at 2MoreTakes, and we'll see you next time.
Until next time.
Bye!